what your views are. I mean, and like, you're gonna have to excuse me for a moment, because as someone who did grow up in a religious household, I just find even the religious argument for mandating these laws is just so ridiculous. And we live in a secular nation, and that secular democracy must be defended, because it is what helps facilitate a safe nation for all who live in it, where all are respected. And so just as a person would not want to be forced into receiving an abortion, they should not force others into forcing them into carrying a pregnancy. And for people who say, oh, but you're harming a life, I believe this is life. Well, some religions don't. So how about that? Our Jewish brothers and sisters, they are able to have an abortion according to their faith. You know, there are so many faiths that do not have the same definition of life as fundamentalist Christians. And so what about their rights? What about their right to exercise their faith? And it is theocratic. It's authoritarian. It is wrong. It's wrong.
She's just a devil woman with evil on her mind. Beware the devil woman, she's gonna get you. She's just a devil woman with evil on her mind. Beware the devil woman, she's gonna get you from behind.
As someone who grew up in a Christian household, I've been thinking a lot about the parable of Christ. And if you all would indulge me for a moment, for those who may not be Christian, those who happen to be Christian or may not be familiar with the story, it's still a story that I think would be is relevant in general, right? This parable is of a woman. A lot of people may have heard the phrase, let he without sin throw the first stone. Let's talk about that story for a second. In that story, there is a woman who, and excuse me if I get like some of these small details a little bit off for generous interpretation, but I'm getting the gist of it here for you all. There's a story where there's a woman, right? She was not allowed to be granted a divorce from her husband. Her husband refused to grant her a divorce, and at that time, if that happened, he had control, and that was that. And so, but for all intents and purposes, they were not really together. There were strong religious / political-esque leaders. They kind of blurred the lines a little bit between politics and religion. And many of these Pharisees were in a physical relationship with this woman. Now, let's be really clear about the power dynamic here. When you have several powerful people doing this, it frankly really blurs the lines of consent. Because what choice would she really have when these people hold so much power in a time like that, right? And so at one point, one of the Pharisees is caught with the woman. And she is immediately marched out into the town square. And she's marched out before she's even able to get dressed. So they force her outside. She's barely dressed, trying to cover herself. And everyone is starting to surround the woman. And they're trying to figure out, wow, we caught her with one of the Pharisees. How evil, etc. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do with her. Are we going to stone her, or etc. They're going through all of the options. Of course, the Pharisees, this doesn't really seem to be subject to any sort of similar treatment. that she is, even though he was just as complicit. And if anything, he was the one that was abusing power and public trust. And they're all surrounding her, trying to figure out what's going on. And then they say, okay, there's this, basically, Christ. He comes over and everyone starts putting their attention to him on what to do. And he starts drawing in the sand, something in the sand, and people come out and they start to see that he has here written down, let he without sin cast the first stone. He was talking about the Pharisees. He wasn't talking about her. And sometimes people interpret this story as saying, implying that she was a sinner and everyone else is a sinner as well. And so sinners can't really judge sinners, like everybody just, kind of relax. But really, I think there's deeper meaning to that story. And because he essentially says to her, go forth. And he doesn't condemn her. The people that did something wrong there were those who were abusing their power. There are a lot of Pharisees running around today, trying to abuse women, trying to take their autonomy away, and all in the name of a book that they haven't really studied that closely. And for someone who says, go forth and sin no more, do you think he was, I see that there's a comment here saying, oh, he was talking to her. Was he? Was he? It's commonly interpreted. But read it again. Read it again.
She's just a devil woman with evil on her mind. Beware the devil woman, she's gonna get you. She's just a devil woman with evil on her mind. Beware the devil woman, she's gonna get you. She's just a devil woman with evil on her mind. Beware the devil woman, she's gonna get you. She's just
And for people who say, oh, but you're harming a life. I believe this is life. Well, some religions don't. So how about that?
No, you bring up the real stuff, the real Bible, what the Bible really says, and start talking it, you'll find out who the haters are.
It's a spiritual battle, a warfare between good and evil.
I really believe that if you can imagine it, and not fantasy, just, daydream, but if it becomes a part of you, if it is something that you conceive in your imagination, you can give birth to it. It can be done.
Thanks a lot for searching that out, man. Appreciate that. Fisherman in the box. Fisherman in a box.